What we're here to talk about is Maine politics and what's going on in Maine. It's been in the spotlight. How does it feel to be known for something other than your incredible lobster?
I, you know, Maine is and has always been my favorite state in the country and is home. And it is exciting to have so many exciting races going. We have a very competitive governor's race, a Senate race, and now a second congressional district race that I
Well,
just entered.
for folks who aren't aware, this is Jordan Wood. He was originally running over for that Senate seat. I did a video about how you also can beat Susan Collins because I feel like the media had already picked their pony and Grant Plattner, and they were like, "This is the only guy we're going to talk about." And I was like, "There's got to be other guys," and that's how I found you. And I was like, "This dude seems pretty cool." And I'm glad we're getting to chat now. But you recently switched from the Senate race to this congressional race. What made you make that change?
Yeah, so Jared Golden, who's our congressman in the second district, just decided 2 weeks ago now that he was not going to seek reelection, which, the election is a year away, so it feels far off, but that's very late for a top uh, House race in the country. And so we start collecting signatures January 1st. So, I'm in a primary for the Senate to take on Susan Collins, and just sort of thinking with my husband and talking with families and supporters about, what's the best path forward, continue in this Democratic primary with two other candidates who both have also raised a lot of money. And or is it the right thing? And it ultimately did feel like the right thing to do, which is to transition and contest the second district, which I've always approached this. The reason I got into the Senate race is that I believe that this is a moment of true crisis for our country and the future of democracy, and that we must elect a House and Senate majority that is going to stand up to Trump, hold him accountable, and defend the Constitution. And what we've seen since I got in the race in April nationally is Republicans trying to rig districts even more than they had before, and we just can't afford to not contest such an important swing district. And so it was a tough decision, but ultimately I think the best one for Maine, and for me right now.
What were you doing before you were running for Senate and now Congress?
Yeah, so I was at the Capitol on January 6th as a chief of staff for Katie Porter. I
I was
always
like,
have to
okay,
clarify.
in what context, friend?
That would really take this interview in a different direction. As a chief of staff for the certification process. And after that event, I think it really exposed for me, and I think a lot of Americans, how vulnerable our democracy is when you have a political movement in this country that is committed to undermining our democracy, resorting to political violence. And so I stepped down as Katie's chief to start a group called Democracy First, which we have spent the past 4 years working to elect pro-democracy candidates to the offices that would oversee certification so that Trump would be unable to steal the next presidential election. And so that's the work that I have been on until I decided to run for Senate, because ultimately I think the work of protecting the guardrails of our democracy, the ability to have free and fair elections, if we have a public and citizens that are willing to elect someone as anti-democratic as Donald Trump, then they're losing hope in democracy and its ability to solve the biggest problems facing our country. And so we need to really, we have, I think, 2 years here to create an opposition party that's going to defend democracy, but do it by delivering on the issues that are most important to working people.
I think that's so good to hear you say the opposition party, right? Because so much of the conversation now is about the Democratic Party is such a big tent, it's got room for Marjorie Taylor Greene, but not necessarily Zoran Mamdani, right? We're not totally there with him, but we're there with her. And Susan Collins has been in the seat for a long time, and sometimes she sort of throws the Democrats a bone, and most of the time she doesn't. And so there's been this sort of eye on Maine in particular as a reflection of the greater America to say, is being a centrist serving us right now, or are we in a time of crisis where truly we need to see your values and what you stand for, and that you're willing to be in opposition to those who would cause harm to our democracy? Or are you still feeling wishy-washy, I want to be friends with everybody guy? How do you think that is playing out in the Senate race? Because you were a part of that. If we could just talk about that for a little while, what
Yeah.
are you hearing from people who maybe used to be Collins voters and are now, look in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that this is such an important point because I think political courage looks different at different moments in time in the Trump era, particularly. Like the work at Democracy First I just talked about. I worked with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and other what I would say is pro-democracy, courageous Republicans who I still disagree with on a lot of issues. But what they've demonstrated is that we share a common understanding of the threat that Donald Trump poses and a commitment to the nonpartisan principles of our democracy. Susan Collins, you're right. She has not been the worst Republican in the U.S. Senate. Now, one example of that is after January 6th, she did one of the only Republicans that did vote to impeach Trump. But what we have seen in Trump's second term, and you saw this right at the beginning, is that she is not willing in this second term with Trump restored to power to use her office and her authority to defend our Constitution. And when I got in the race, it was right after she had voted to confirm RFK Jr., who is a real threat to the safety of all Americans. But my 10-month-old daughter was rejected from getting her second COVID shot. This is what happens when you put somebody who is not just unqualified, but is a dangerous person to be the head of Department of Health and Human Services. And I think that Susan Collins knows better, but she doesn't have the courage to do the right thing. And I went up to her office with my neighbors in Augusta and asked, like, why did she do this? She also voted to confirm Pam Bondi. And they said, well, she believes that the president gets to appoint his own cabinet. And I'm just like, well, why the heck does the
So why would they
Constitution
have
even
you
put the
vote?
Senate? Yeah, why? What's
Yeah.
your if you're just there to check a box and approve something, when you have somebody like Pam Bondi, who's such a dangerous person to have atop of Department of Justice, and that's what the slogan of the Senate campaign, which I still just fundamentally believe in, is this is a moment that Maine needs courage, not just words of concern.
What does courage mean to you right now? Like, let's say you get in there. What's the first courageous thing you're going to do?
I I mean, I've been watching, and I don't know if you have Marie Huselkamp-Perez on the House floor right now, where that's courage. Like standing up to your own party is sometimes when I think courage is best demonstrated in politics because you're taking a risk. It's easy to call out your enemies and call out Donald Trump. Like we all do that. But to stand up for what's right, which I believe Marie is, that's courageous. So that's not what I'll be standing up for. But I'll for example, like in stock trading, you know,
Mm.
that's another example where you're standing up to people in both parties. This is not insider trading among members of Congress is not just a problem with Republicans. It's a problem with all of Congress, and you've got to stand up and speak out against that. And it's gonna have not gonna upset. You're gonna upset people.
You're real pissed about that. I hope you also get on them about crypto, which is sort of like the new stock trading.
Yes, and my former boss, Katie Porter, crypto spent somewhere around close to $20 million to defeat her in her Senate primary. And it's like, no, we don't allow any industry in America to write their own rules and regulations. Like, the government is there to be an independent arbiter of consumer protection and making sure that regulation that is best for consumers and not written by lobbyists. And it's just crazy to me how an industry so quickly has captured so much of our politics.
When people get elected in, I usually ask them, like, who's your congressional bestie? Like, who's been nice to you? Who had lunch with you on the first day? In our current party, who do you think is doing it right? Like, who do you hope that you'll be able to work with? And what would be like your dream first day in office if you could just have the perfect day?
God, the perfect day. In the U.S. House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Uh,
You get to take the train, number one. The train will be the best.
well, so only one House office building actually has the train.
Oh,
So I've only been on it once, but yeah, I guess I would go do that. I would search. There's a swimming pool, I think, that only members of Congress are able to use. So I would go find that. I've never seen
yeah.
it. But in terms of who I'm most excited to work with is I was the political director at NCIS United in the 2018 cycle, so helped elect a lot of those what I think future leaders of our party that that came in after Trump was elected, and it would just be really fulfilling for me to get to work with them in another way. Jason Crow is one that comes to mind. That Brad, and then I'm blessed to I've worked with 3 members of Congress and consider them all mentors. Brad Schneider from Illinois, Raul Ruiz from Palm Springs area in California. Katie Porter is no longer there, but I Jason Crow would be terrific. Yeah, so
Those are all names that I don't typically hear. People come on my show and they're like, AOC, I can't wait to work
okay.
with Summer
Uh,
Lee, like Jesse
yes.
Crockett, right? Yeah, all favorites plus
Yeah,
plus.
yeah. So AOC, so I'd mentioned I was at the Capitol on January 6th, barricaded office. I was barricaded in the office all day with AOC, actually.
Oh,
She took refuge in Katie Porter's office that day. She is an amazing person, like a real public servant. I would be very excited to get to work with her again. Ayanna Pressley, I don't know if you thought she's terrific. I mean, there's some really there's a lot of bad members of Congress on both parties, but there are some really terrific ones.
one of the things that's happening right now, and I was just interviewing Ann Bossum, who's the author of White Lies, the lies we were told about the Civil War, and like how that has affected our truth and our democracy today, because there,
Mm,
wasn't accountability for the way things were, and like the Daughters of the Confederacy putting up all those monuments we're still dealing with, and all that shit. And I asked her, what do you think is the modern day thing that we need to make sure people tell the truth about? And she was like, the insurrection. Period. The end. They're
mhm,
already trying to rewrite
mhm.
that. As a person that was there, like how is that working for you? Like, I was in New York City on 9/11, and people in, like, Ohio have a story about how it affected them, and I have my story about how it affected me, and then I hear conspiracy theories, and I get so pissed because 'cause I'm like, "You weren't there. You can't discredit this." Like, it was terrible. As a person who was in there, like, how important is it that we tell the truth about what that day was like, and why do you think there aren't more documentaries right now about that day?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it just here in Maine, we actually just passed legislation that would create a day of remembrance for January 6th.
Yeah,
I think almost every Republican in the legislature voted against it, and that's just, I think it is so important to remember that day because I mentioned how it really exposed the vulnerabilities for our democracy and how reliant we are on norms and not laws to follow through on this. I one of the scariest moments of my life on January 6th wasn't about my personal safety, but I remember being in the office and in hearing that the lawyers for the House of Representatives weren't quite sure what would happen if the certification vote was stopped.
right.
Or what would happen if the records, the tallies of the certified state election, if those were stolen or destroyed. And that's like a very, very startling reality to think about. But the lawyers don't even know what happens if this is and and also how a number of Republicans that I talked to in the subsequent days didn't quite grasp what they were a part of. Like, that January 6th was only made possible because so many Republicans, you think about Josh Hawley out there like pumping his fist and Ted Cruz and so many others that like perpetuated this lie. They are who helped like foment this event. And then to think how many Republicans still voted not to certify the election after the result. So I think the fragility of our democracy, and just sort of like how real this threat is and how dangerous, the fact that we haven't come to a common truth, a common understanding of that day, and that Trump has been restored to the White House, I think we just cannot forget. Absolutely.
What do you think about, like, the responsibility for folks like you who would be coming into Congress as a freshman sucks, right? Like, it's hard, you're at the bottom of the list for committee assignments and whatnot, but we need that enthusiasm of new people with new ideas so badly. Do you see yourself able to sort of do any harm reduction in, like, our relationships with foreign countries that used to be allies that are kinda looking at us sideways? Like, what kind of work do you think you would do outside of just domestic policy?
Yeah. Uh, you know, my mom grew up in the Congo. Actually, my grandfather was a medical missionary. He ran a hospital in central Congo, um, and it's been so tragic to see USAID dismantled, destroyed, and so much years, decades of good work from public servants that has just saved the lives of millions of people. And I think it's a something that both parties need to reckon with, that their failure to really make sure that the American public understood the good of our foreign aid work is something that we've got to renew. We can't. I think it's in line with this question of like how do we remember our history correctly, truly. I think that we need to remember what Trump has dismantled and what must be rebuilt, and also remember how it was able to be taken down so quickly, and the need to stand up for that again, because the U.S. has done amazing work in world history to defend and uphold democracy and human rights. We're not perfect, no country is, but we have done a lot of good, and we're now seeing what it's like when we're not don't have that presence, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity to restore our commitment to those values and help educate the public again at like why this work's so important.
Mhm. What are you gonna do if they try to overturn gay marriage? Like, in general, do you think it's coming? Like, it's safe in Maine?
So it is safe in Maine, and I take a lot of obviously thought a lot about this. I'm
Sure.
married, and we have a child now, and that makes me think about marriage very differently. Like for some reason, before we had a child, if like the government decided to like nullify my husband and I's marriage, I'd be like, oh well, we're still together, so like I don't know, we'll make do. But when you have a child, I think it just thinks differently. But you know, we codified marriage equality after the Oberfeld decision, and Roe was struck down just sort of in preparation for that. And that had a lot of Republican support, but like Susan Collins voted for it. It passed pretty, with bipartisan margins. And so I think there is enough consensus in the country that marriage is a good that should be available to everybody, and that there is enough bipartisan support for that we would not let it be stripped away from people across the country. But, and I hope that the court understands that the cruelty of separating families, is something that I hope we have enough goodness left to protect together. But it's a fear.
Cruelty is the hallmark of the Trump administration.
Hmm.
Cruelty is the point. Cruelty is the end goal. There is no other, goal. If you look at what's happening with ICE or what's happening with kids in sports or any number of things, the only thing it's driven by is hate and cruelty because it doesn't serve anybody. Nobody gets more if other people get less. And so I agree. Like when we say, oh, it's cruel, I'm like, yeah, that's all.
Yeah. So my father's a Baptist pastor, and I don't know
That
that
must have been a fun coming out.
it was interesting, but but my dad also performed my wedding, so
They come around. Yeah.
they come around, and I think that a lot of, I could just think about the journey my own family has been on, um, and I think that we've got a lot of success here with marriage and how quickly we've opened it up and brought people into supporting it, and having a lot of Christians support it,
Mhm.
particularly young Christians. So I have, got to maintain hope in our fellow citizens that there are limits to political cruelty.
I hope so. How did you prepare your family for when you said maybe they were a little bit ready already because you had already worked down in DC on the Hill with Katie Porter before. But like when you told your husband and your daughter, Daddy's going to run for Congress, were they like, now? Or were they like excited about it? Do they know what it means to be a political family? And like, do they feel prepared for that?
Yeah. Well, Ella Grace just went, "Meh," she's only 10 months, so she can't speak anything. So
She didn't have a lot of choice.
she didn't have a lot of choice. She doesn't know it. In some ways, I did think about that. Like, she's so little that she won't even remember the negative ads that they run against her dad.
I
Like,
know, against her poor dad.
yeah. So she didn't have much say. She was happy. I think she wishes I was at the house more. But,
Yeah.
my husband and I was very much it was a joint decision. Like I said, I'm not doing this unless you're 110% fully on board and committed to this. And we both agreed that this wasn't just the right thing to do, that it was something that we must do. That this moment of crisis really calls us to all step up, whether that is volunteering, showing up at protests, or becoming an organizer. I've met people that have like left careers to go be organizers, field organizers. We all have different roles, and I think that we were in a state where nobody had the courage to step up and challenge Susan Collins, and they said we must do this. And so, I think that we both view elected office as public service, and that you don't know when you're going to be called to do it. And I just as easily could have say I could go my whole life with never running for office, because it might not I might be not be called to do it in a moment. So I think that that we were we were in agreement, and we know the risks and the threat. It's not. We've had people, especially as a gay couple with a child. I mean, the things that people say online, the death threats, and it's just like, you've got to harden yourself to it and know it's coming.
That's a lot. When I started getting popular with the news, I remember having a conversation with my wife about, like, do we want this? Do we want this, or should I just go back to, like, cooking? Like, I could go back and do the other thing again. And she was like, "No, I think you can do it, and we have to try. And I think what you're doing is important, and you need that family support because so often, as a human, when you're up against, like you said, death threats and fear, and like, the consultants are all over you or the social media is all over you, you have to have that foundational safety that you go
Yes.
home to that says, no, you have to try. You're doing good.
Yes,
And I'm glad to
yes.
hear you have that.
I mean, the truth. We just need more people that tell the truth, and that are in it for the right reasons, are not in it to enrich themselves, are not in it for fame and recognition, that are just like because if we give up, if we give in and just sort of let it just be filled by people that are in it for the wrong reasons, we'll fail as a democracy. So thank you for I I'm sure you get probably more threats than I do.
It's wild. They're creative. Some of them are creative. I do respond to them, which tends to be interesting. Have you ever responded to your hate comments? You probably
Some
shouldn't.
somebody after you mentioned the primary I was in,
Yeah.
where one of my opponents, um I said ultimately I said he's disqualified for me as a voter. Um, people interpret that as me calling for him to drop out, but it was just like, I just don't think that it seems like he's really learned his lesson, that he understands the pain that's caused by these words and this language, and why it's a problem to have this tattoo. And somebody was really creative. Is it that they called me the F slur,
Oh, of course.
and they dropped the G's because those are actually like censored, I guess, on Twitter, and replaced it with an 88 for Heil
Oh,
Hitler. And I
no.
said, that's some like creative, the way that you're like weaving together Nazism and homophobia. And I just posted it. It said, you should drop out F slur
Yeah.
88. And I just said no.
Yeah. No,
And I got
thanks.
a lot of, and it's a lot of really, so many people reached out and were like, I'm so sorry that they said this to you. Like, hang in there, keep it up. You can't drop out. Like, and like, it's like, yeah, there's like a lot more good people than there are bad people.
There are indeed. Sometimes I respond to some of the comments or rants that I get, and people will be like, "You weren't oh, V, I'm so sorry. You weren't supposed to see that. I was just blowing off steam. I was just talking shit. I never thought you'd see it. I like your show. I didn't like that one thing you said, and I was just it's like when you yell at the TV, "Oh my god, I can't believe you saw it." And then I was like, "You know what? Maybe this is for the reader, right? This is for the community and not for me specifically." And it's like when I'm yet watching the Bills game and I'm screaming at Josh Allen, if he ever heard me, I'd be mortified, right? Like, he's still my hero. I just didn't
Yeah.
like that play he chose or whatever. And so it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it gives you some perspective.
Well, I
Well,
think like you think about it, like, would you walk out on your front porch if you lived in like a crowd and just start yelling that stuff at strangers? No,
yeah,
you wouldn't. I mean,
no,
but that's like kind of like what you're doing on Twitter when you say these terrible, terrible things.
yeah, it's goofy. So let's get to what you are running on, right? So now you're running for Congress in Maine. Is it ninth district? Is it? No,
So
I'm
the
way off.
second, the second
Second.
district. We
Oh my
only have
God.
two. We only have two congressional districts, the first and the second.
For how big it is?
Well, our
Did we
population is
get in
about
a civics lesson? I don't know anything
one
about
point
Maine.
four million, 1.4 million people.
Oh, that's right. Because like,
Yeah.
I have to tell the Republicans so often land doesn't vote when they show me a lit up
Yeah.
red
So
yeah.
it's like switching from Senate to House. Like in California, there's
Yeah,
two Senate seats like everywhere,
yeah,
and 52 House seats,
so
right?
many.
But in Maine, it's like I'm already campaigning,
Me too.
and the district's half the state and in
Yeah,
most of the land.
that's wild. So what is your platform? Like, what are you running on? What are you promising people? Why should they vote for you?
So in many ways, like, this was what made the transition easy. Is my campaign's always been really focused on two things, which is that my experience working in Congress has taught me that what stands in the way of our ability to really accomplish the progressive change that the American people need in their lives is political corruption. That the explosion of big money and corporate money and special interests, their stranglehold on our politics, particularly on Congress, is what has both stopped us from accomplishing things, but has also eroded trust that the public has that Congress's policy decisions are done to best benefit their lives. So I say, like, that's got to be issue number one. We need to fix this political system so the public knows the legislation that we pass is done in the best interest. And then we have got to, I think we're at an inflection point where we've got to pass historic reforms that address affordability. That we don't have a broken childcare system in America. We don't have a childcare system in America. And the same way we grow up knowing no matter where you live in this country, that you'll be able to go to public schools, you should be able to live anywhere in this country and also know you can start a family if you want to, and you won't go broke doing it. And so a system of universal childcare, and universal health care. When we passed Obamacare, I was in college in 2010. That was meant to be like a step in the right direction towards universal single payer. That's the journey we're on. But the special interests, particularly the pharmaceutical and health insurance companies, have stopped us. And so we need to be put on a path towards Medicare for all. I think I talk about the public option as a way of creating universal coverage. And then housing. We just don't have enough housing. It's just driving up prices. The average age for a first-time home buyer now is 40 years old. Like and so we have got to make investments on a federal level into every state that allows communities that have a demand for housing it'll create jobs. And all of this will create jobs. Creating universal healthcare where there's 100% insurance, like that creates jobs in healthcare.
Yeah, and money's there. Secret
Yes.
history we never learned. Healthcare companies used to have to be nonprofit. Now they can profit, and once they did that, and that was like 2000s or something, they changed it, and that fucked us bad, right? That made it where we are in the situation we're in now. The
Yep.
enshittification of healthcare. I can't even get healthcare. I pay $1,700 a month, and then I still have like a crazy deductible, and I still don't qualify for half this stuff.
And it's going up, 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 up.
Yeah,
Yep.
because they want to share their profits. I mean, easy.
Yeah.
You can't
And
profit off of the industry anymore. It's done.
And there's so much we can do to improve things. Like for 1 year, I lived in France as a kid. My dad was a pastor at a church in France. And, we got annual physicals at school.
Yeah.
You know how easy it would be for us to do that in America? To give all kids, there's just if you take it out of the for-profit sector, so much is possible.
Mm-hmm. When I worked in food security, we found that part of the reason why the food banks weren't connecting all of the dots, no matter, we were like, we give them all the funding in the whole world, as much as they possibly want. We lock them out. It didn't matter because people still had to take 2 buses to get there. It wasn't until we were delivering food, fresh produce to people's homes that we were actually seeing the rate of hunger change in Baltimore. And it's the same thing with like doctors and healthcare. Even if they had access to healthcare, but they had to travel to a certain doctor, there's only one in that area. It's totally different than bringing it to
Yep.
them. It's like,
Yep.
that's such an easy, great thing, and people would love that. Why aren't we doing that?
Yes.
That.
Yes. And, my family, we were middle class, but I've come to understand that we were barely middle class. And so I have an understanding of how I was never eligible for the school lunch program or breakfast before school started.
Yeah, we
or
missed
after
like
school programs.
$2,000 one year.
Yeah,
My mom was
exactly. It's like,
she was like,
and you don't understand this stuff as a kid. Like, why can't I know my parents are in debt. I know we just had to return groceries. I know that I'm having to put sweaters on because the cost of heating oil has gone up. But why don't we get free lunch? And there's a lot of kids and so there's and it builds up resentment. I think that's how do you get Trump is you get a lot of people that feel like there's all the other people benefiting from these
Right.
programs, but our family's not.
And they're not. And that's the other thing, doing free school lunch, free school breakfast, so good for local communities, so good for farms within 300 miles.
Yes.
You can set up those contracts where the dairy farmers know how much fluid milk they're producing for each school. Everybody's getting one. Nobody has to worry about it going to waste or having to take it back, or God forbid, telling the kid, there's not enough money on your swipe, so I'm going to dump your lunch. All this sick, crazy things that we do because policies don't line up with humanity. But I'm glad to hear you say that as well. And when it comes to housing, I hope we're also talking. The thing I found, because we just bought a house, but we moved to Rochester, New York, like one of the last places that's affordable and decent in the entire world as far as New York goes, was there was a lot of like very low income housing that we couldn't get and that we wouldn't have qualified for. And then there was a lot of like McMansion housing. It's like all the stuff left over from when the boomers went through were either the starter houses that they had in the 50s and 60s that were dope are not accessible to you anymore, or these like McMansion neighborhoods that are so disconnected from any kind of walkability. And it's like we got to fill in that middle place a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
And I think,
planting that with you.
yeah, I mean, I'm here for it. Like,
Yeah.
there's, and I think there's there's some stuff we learned during the pandemic. I'm a true like optimist on this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there's some good that came out of the pandemic, and that like we realized like I didn't know that I'd be able to move home to Maine. Like I always wanted to, but the pandemic is what like gave me that opportunity because I didn't know I could work in politics, like national
Both
politics from
kind
Maine.
of. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of communities that we can really help revitalize by making sure that people in those communities understand what potential economic and job opportunities they have that they weren't aware of because of virtual work. I think that's a huge thing that Maine can really benefit from, but also like every time I have friends visit from New York City or Washington or LA, they're just like, I want to live here. This is amazing. And like my husband and I live in a lobster village of like 500 people. And I'm like, you can too. You can too. Like you work, you could find a job that allows you to like only travel like once every couple of weeks. And it's possible. It really is.
It's what people
But
want.
I don't know. We have to like find a like public awareness campaign. Like, I don't know, just
I do my part to gay up Rochester. I'm telling you, I'm forever telling people, gay people in Florida and the South, I'm like, move here. It's good. Everybody's moved to the North Greece neighborhood where all the gays live with their kids. You'll have a great time. But like, we're seeing so many people come back to these Rust Belt kind of
yeah.
areas now that
Yep.
remote work is possible because we do have great museums. We've got good parks. We've got Lake Ontario, like you guys have there. You have wild spaces. You have outdoor spaces, things that like the city can't provide. And that even if we were down in the city, I couldn't afford to indulge in all the culture the way that maybe we could have in the
Yeah.
70s or 80s,
So
you
did
know?
you live in New York City
I
before?
did. I lived in New York
Yeah.
City and Washington, D.C., which was great when I was young and willing to tolerate roommates. But as a full adult, it gets a little trickier for you. I also worked in restaurants. So that like was my food budget. I would just eat family meal at the restaurant all the time and then like try to rush Broadway tickets or like go see my
Uh,
friend's stupid little one woman show that I loved. It was incredible, but was like free tickets. You had to buy a drink or something. That's how I
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
you
that's
can't
how I
even
did
do
it
that
too.
anymore.
No,
Like,
no.
they don't have these spaces for artists living even and just people to be creative and interesting, so
I mean, you probably can relate to this, but like I remember when if I met somebody through work, whatever, that had like 3 children, I my immediate reaction was like, "Oh, are you like married to Elon Musk? Like,
yeah,
how do you afford 3 children?"
yeah.
And it's like both my parents are of five, and like they're like middle class. Like it's like in this, it just breaks the bank. It's just not possible.
I know, same I could not have conceived of children until we moved to Rochester. I was like, "There's no way I'd ever be able to afford it. Where are they gonna go to school?" I think I'd have to apply to get them into a DC school now before they're even born, like, it's just so
Yes.
competitive and crazy, and folks are sick of it. It's why I think millennials coming into power is a good thing, because
Yes.
we remember the prosperity of the '80s and '90s, and then we also directly felt ourselves get screwed over so bad, but we have the nostalgia to remember that it used to be different. And it could be
Mm-hmm.
that way again, and we're not that far away
Yeah.
from when
Yep.
it was good, and
Yep.
being
Yep.
able to fix that. So,
Yep. David Hogue, who he sort of supports campaigns primarying incumbents, Democrats, and etc. He had this line that like it just always stuck with me, which was like, if we had more senators who grew up with active shooter drills in school, like I did, like
yep,
I don't know if you did. I mean, I vividly remember Columbine, and I'm from Lewiston, where the shooting was. Like
it
it,
shook us,
we
but I
don't.
was in high school, I was almost out, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, we don't have no senators that grew up knowing what active shooter drills. But you know what? A lot of senators grew up with like nuclear bomb drills. Like
Mhm,
what we didn't grow up with that. We had but the older generation, the boomers, actually like did a pretty good job stopping nuclear war. And I think that like there's so much that millennials can offer when they're in power. Like we'll finally, I think, truly address issues like gun safety
mhm.
because it we we know why it has to be a priority. It's not abstract.
Mhm. Same with social media. Remember what it was like to hang out in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot and have to make friends with people before social media came along. And I also feel like millennials understand when you have enough of something. Like, I
Mhm.
don't seek to be uber crazy famous or uber crazy rich. I just seek to have enough to live a life where I could go to the grocery store and know when I check out, I'm going to be okay. And I think that
Yes.
that's sort of like step one towards building back prosperity for folks is I want every single person to go to the grocery store, not worry about it. Just be able
Yep.
to get the food that they want and be okay and know that that's not
Yep.
gonna break them, or be able to have their kid fall out of a tree and know that they're not gonna lose their house or because they have a new medical bill or whatever the case may be. I think we just want people to feel safe. Like, Joe
Yes.
Biden used to call it breathing room, and I think that was okay for that time, but I think it's like the money is there, it's just being hoarded by a few people, and we can fix that. We can fix that.
Yes. We have the power to, and it's like, I it feels like young people today too, it's like they think their, like, path to success, the future that they want is, like, winning the lottery,
Mhm.
like,
Right.
and
Well, because it
and it
seems the
we
most realistic path
y
when there's no jobs
yes.
or anything, yeah.
Yeah, like, how do you gosh, how do you ever afford to live in a city and have children and, like,
Yeah.
no job's gonna do, like, you must win the lottery, but or get lucky, like,
Yeah, or
in the
sell
stock
your
market or
soul.
something.
Yeah, or there's
Yes,
some
or, like,
grift out
be
there. Yeah.
a crypto speculator or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But are we didn't I don't ever remember ever learning. I always thought, like, you can achieve the future you want, but Jordan, like, nothing's handed to you. You gotta earn it. You gotta work hard. You gotta treat people well. You gotta tell the truth, follow the rules, and, like, you'll have setbacks, but if you stick with it. And I mean, like, that's how I always thought about the Senate campaign too. Like, it was, yes, it was frustrating to see, like, other candidates, even no matter what we did, like, get more. But, I don't ever expect it to get a Senate primary handed to me. I don't
Right.
expect the House. Like, you got to work for it. You got to earn it.
Yeah. I do love our millennial optimism, though. I've met a lot of us out there right now. I feel like it's working. And while Gen Z may think we're cringe, I promise you, cringe is going to work out for all of us, okay?
Yes.
Y'all don't
Yes.
even know what it was like to be us as teenagers and young people. It was awesome. And we just want to bring that back for you.
Yes, we truly do. We
Yeah.
truly, it's our time. Yeah, it's our time to serve. One thing that's really crazy about the Senate race is if I had been successful, I would be serving with Angus King, who
Oh,
was my
wow.
governor as a kid. And Maine was actually the first state that put a laptop on every kid's desk. And I remember when I got that laptop in
Yeah.
seventh grade, it was like I couldn't go to sleep. It was like night before Christmas. Could not sleep. I was so excited. And we were told that, like, you all must learn this machine and this is your future. All jobs will be in this. You must go to college. And, like, yeah, that there was some truth to that, but, like, God, we are living with all of the bad side of that too. Like,
No.
we need more people in different vocations, and not everyone has to go to college. And also, like,
Preschool, but yeah.
there's a lot that you could do outside of the computer. But the fact that I would be serving with somebody who, like, was the first governor that put a laptop in every seventh grader's hand, I'm like, I would never, man, I wouldn't make that mistake again.
Yeah. Maybe not. Crazy. Well, thanks for chatting with me, and
Oh,
we
this is
went a
so
little
fun.
long, but I could talk to you all day, and if you ever
I
need to come back, tell us how it's going on the road, especially as we get closer to the election. I'm sure it's gonna get crazier, but hopefully folks know Jordan Wood. This is a household name that you need to know, running in Maine's 2nd district, as there are only 2.
This is such a breath of fresh air. So, like, thank you
Good.
so much for having me. And getting to meet your audience. You do
The
great
nice
work.
side of the news. You're welcome under the desk anytime. Bye, Jordan.
Bye.